This happened near my home during my high school years. There was a park near my house, and beside the park ran a small path. I used to take that route home from cram school, but one night during my sophomore year, a woman was attacked there. Whether she lived or died, I'm not sure, but not long after the incident, both my parents and the school issued orders don't go through there after dark. At the time, I figured it was probably some perverted flasher lurking around, so I didn't ask questions. I just accepted it. So normally I avoided that path like they told me to. But one day I stayed late at cram school. By the time I headed home it was past 10. Eager to get back and dressed, I stopped caring. I decided to just take the shortcut, the small path by the park. As I walked along that road, I glanced at the empty park beside me. It felt desolate. Under the weak glow of the park street lamps, I noticed something. Far ahead, a woman was walking toward me. Because I was on that path, the one where the attack happened, a creeping, ominous, chilling dread washed over me. I kept walking, watching her, thinking to myself, that woman seems strange. What if she's some kind of pervert? Or dangerous? What if she suddenly attacks me? My mind spiraled with wild thoughts as we drew closer and closer to each other. The distance between us shrank. I stared at her nervously. Then suddenly, a sense of wrongness crept into my chest. Something about the woman looked off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. It wasn't until she reached me, the instant we passed each other, that cold sweat dripped down my forehead. Because I saw her clearly. Her condition terrified me, and I understood the source of that wrongness. The woman had no neck. The space between her body and her head was hollow. Her head floated above her body. I knew there was a good chance I'd seen it wrong, but I didn't have the courage to turn around and check. I was terrified that if I looked back, her head would be right there hovering in front of my face. Some horror movie nightmare. So I kept walking, trembling, not looking back, not until I'd put nearly 50 meters between us. The distance calmed me slightly. I decided to look. To confirm, I turned around. The woman stood exactly where we passed each other, and she really had no neck. Her head floated above her body. But what made my stomach turn was this, though her body faced away from me, her face was turned toward me, watching me. When I saw her like that, I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My heart pounded violently. I wanted to run, but my whole body locked up. I couldn't move. I never imagined that the first time I saw something supernatural, the fear would paralyze me completely. I just stood there, staring at the woman for several seconds. Then she reacted. I watched her mouth open wide in a smile. I couldn't hear her after, but the way her mouth stretched open, she was laughing. Her reaction triggered pure instinct. Danger. And in that instant, my body suddenly obeyed again. I spun around and ran. Along the route home, I could faintly hear footsteps chasing me from behind. But until I reached the entryway of my house, I didn't have the courage to look back. I could only scream wildly and run with every ounce of strength I had. Later, after I made it inside and into the entryway, I felt relief. That terrifying thing hadn't followed me in. I still don't know what it was, but after that experience, I never dared walk that path again, not even in daylight. This happened when I went hiking alone on an extremely unpopular mountain. It was a weekday. After I climbed up, there wasn't a single person around. Just me. I moved forward, enjoying the quiet forest and the scent of phyton sides. When I reached a certain spot, I noticed something ahead. The hiking trail curved to the right, and suddenly the path narrowed. The bushes along the side seemed to stretch out over a large area, but the trail itself had been cut so small. It felt strange. My instinct told me the bushes on the left might have originally been part of the trail. At that moment, my adventurous spirit flared up, so I stepped off the path and pushed into the bushes on the left. After I entered from the left side, I discovered there really was a faint trail hidden there. It was a slope leading upward. It looked like it had simply been abandoned for years, overgrown with weeds, so I decided to clear the grass as I went, pushing forward to see what was inside. I climbed for about 10 minutes and reached a gentler, level area. Once I got there, I could see an old dirt road. I wondered where it might lead. I felt a little excited, but I was also afraid of getting lost. So along the way I marked the weeds by the roadside. My markers were simple, just red ribbons I carried with me, tied to the grass. Then I followed the road for about 15 minutes and came to a place where it sloped downward. From there I could see several old houses and warehouses below, along with fields and a well and things like that. So I explored along the road, taking photos as I went. Apart from the sound of wind blowing through the grass and trees, I didn't hear any insects or birds. The whole place was quiet and peaceful. Then I entered the village. Though the village roads were that ancient dirt kind, the routes were clear, not covered by weeds. A few scattered houses stood among the grass and trees. The buildings looked like they'd been abandoned for a long time, but their exteriors seemed well preserved, undamaged by natural disasters. As I passed by several of the houses, I looked inside from the outside. The furniture was still there. Some even had photographs displayed, arranged neatly. It felt like people were still living there. I thought it was impressive, but also disgusting, judging by the height of the weeds. This village had probably been abandoned for decades, yet the houses gave off this feeling that someone still lived in them. Later, I wandered around the village for a while. I felt a little tired, so I sat down by the roadside to rest. Halfway through my rest, I suddenly heard the sound of drumming, boom, boom, boom. The sound was so loud it startled me. Then in an instant, everything went quiet again. I lifted my head and looked around, but I didn't see anything. I had no idea where the sound came from. I felt a little creeped out. Fear wrapped around my whole mood, so I immediately decided to leave the abandoned village. The moment I stood up and turned to leave, I saw an ancient drum sitting in the middle of the road I'd just walked down. I jumped. When I'd looked around just moments ago, that thing definitely wasn't there. It felt too impossible. I froze in place, not knowing whether I should move forward. But aside from going that way, there was no other route out. So I had no choice but to steel myself and walk ahead. I nervously hurried toward the drum. As I passed beside it, I didn't dare look at it even once. After I walked past, nothing happened. I breathed a sigh of relief. Really, I should have just not looked back. But for some reason, I reflexively glanced behind me, and I really did see it. I saw a woman wearing a kimono with her hair tied in an oldest-fashioned style. She stood behind the drum, facing me. Her face was covered with a strange white cloth. On the white cloth, written in red paint, were the words "Shadow of the Spirited Away." Her eyes and nose were covered. Only her mouth was exposed, and she was grinning at me with her mouth wide open. I could see her mouth full of black teeth. The instant I saw her, my head spun and my vision blurred. It felt like the sky and everything around me was spinning endlessly. I was so scared my heart nearly flew out of my chest. No matter what, I had to get out of there fast. The moment I turned away from that woman, the dizziness eased considerably, so I endured the lingering discomfort and made myself run, fleeing that place. As I ran, I heard the drumming start up again, boom, 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 and the sound grew more and more urgent. It followed behind me, chasing me. I didn't know what it was, but I was truly terrified, so I could only run forward at my fastest speed, escaping. When I ran up the slope and out of the village, I was shocked by what I saw. The clear road I'd walked down was gone. Instead, there was a field of very tall weeds. The grass reached about waist-high. I thought, I'm done for. The drumming was still chasing behind me. but I didn't know which way to go anymore. I forced myself to calm down and think seriously about the route I'd taken to get here. I remembered that I'd made markers along the way, so I plunged straight into the grass, trying to find the markers I'd made. Luckily, I really did find them, but the red ribbon markers I'd made looked like they'd been deliberately destroyed. The whole ribbon was damp and tattered. It was absolutely disgusting. With great difficulty, I forced myself to follow the markers through the grass for a stretch, then escaped into an unfamiliar grove of trees. I walked through that forest for who knows how long. Gradually, the drumming behind me faded and disappeared. The sounds around me shifted: insect chirps, bird calls, and then I emerged from the trees. When I came out, I found myself back on a normal hiking trail, but it was an unfamiliar section, not the place where I'd originally entered. I rested for a bit, checked my map and the trail markers. Turns out, I was now about 600 meters ahead of where I'd first forced my way into that hidden grass area. After what I'd just been through, I had no desire to keep climbing, so I headed back down the mountain. Before long, I reached that bend where I'd first ventured into the undergrowth. I was still curious, sure, but I didn't have the courage to even glance toward the thicket. I just kept my head down and ran past as fast as I could. Only after I'd put some distance between myself and that place did I look back. It looked exactly as it had before, overgrown with weeds, like no one had ever set foot there. I don't know if it was just my imagination, but in that moment I faintly heard it, that boom, 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 slowly drifting out from the trees. After that, I never dared set foot on that mountain again. Recently, I rented a room. Right next to it is a shrine. My balcony looks directly out onto the forest that borders the shrine grounds. People who come to worship always use the main approach to reach the hole, so no one ever walks through that forest. It's a quiet place. I had no bad feelings about it at all, but not long after I moved in. One night, I was listening to music through my headphones when I heard something strange underneath the sound. I stopped the music and took off the headphones to listen more carefully. The sound seemed to be coming from outside my window, like someone striking something. Boom, boom, boom. After a while, it stopped. I felt like I'd heard that sound somewhere before, but I didn't think much of it that night and went to sleep. The next morning, on my way to work, I passed by the shrine. The shrine keeper's son was sweeping under the torii gate. He said good morning. I greeted him back. Then he said, "By the way, did you stay up late last night?" He must have been judging by the light from my room. We weren't very close, so the question caught me off guard. I just nodded reflexively and said, "Yeah, I went to bed pretty late." He asked, "Did you hear any strange sounds?" That's when I remembered the striking sound from late last night. He continued, "Look, if you hear that knocking sound, just ignore it, and it's better not to stick your head out to look." I asked, a bit confused, "What do you mean?" He smiled and answered, "That forest outside your balcony, if you hear sounds coming from there, don't get curious and look. Someone's doing what's called Ushai no Kokumari, a cursing ritual. Ushai no Kokumari. It's a curse ritual where you nail a straw doll to a tree at the shrine. Usually you write the name of the person you want to curse on the doll, or attach some of their hair or something. Then you hammer nails into it. You have to do it for several nights in a row. It's an ancient cursing method passed down from old times." He explained all this to me like I knew nothing about it. I was stunned. He went on, "If someone sees you doing this ritual, it fails, and if it fails, the curse rebounds onto you. So people who do this are prepared to die. That's why it's better not to look." I asked nervously, "Is that kind of thing even allowed?" He gave a helpless, bitter smile. "I've tried to forbid it. I collect what they leave behind every morning, but those people won't listen to warnings. so I just leave them alone now. Of course, if I catch them in the act, I'll stop them. But last night the person got away." He paused. "It really is dangerous. Though, some of them, once they realize you're trying to interfere, they'll do anything to retaliate. So it's really better not to look." He said all this in a casual way, but I still felt like this was kind of a bad situation. Still, I'm not exactly a timid person. After learning about it, I wasn't scared. I kept living there quite comfortably. Though sometimes, late at night, I'd still hear it from outside my balcony window. Boom, 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 that knocking sound. At first, the sound bothered me, but eventually I got completely used to it. Still, everyone has nights when they can't sleep and stay up late. That night I had insomnia and went to bed late. As I lay there drowsily, drifting towards sleep, that knocking sound came from outside. Half me is asleep. I listened and thought to myself, cursing someone again. The knocking continued. It kept me awake, and I tossed and turned restlessly. Just as I was getting used to its rhythm, the knocking suddenly became extremely loud and started coming faster and faster. The sound made me uneasy, and I sat up without thinking. After continuing for a while, the knocking finally stopped. Everything fell silent, not a sound anywhere. I couldn't figure out what had just happened, but I didn't dwell on it. I lay back down and fell asleep. The next morning I was woken by a commotion from the shrine. I got up, pulled back the balcony curtains, opened the window, and looked outside. Standing directly in front of my balcony was a police officer, making eye contact with me. He didn't speak, just gestured at me. From his movements, it seemed like he was telling me to close the window and pull the curtains. I caught a glimpse of part of the woods covered with blue tarps. People at the shrine were talking loudly about something, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. Still, seeing those blue tarps, I had a pretty good idea something terrible had happened. I quickly closed and locked the window and pulled the curtains shut. That evening, I saw shocking news in the local paper. The article reported that the shrine director's son had been beaten to death. Later, I heard from the owner of the nearby fish shop that the shrine director's son's skull had apparently been smashed in with a hammer. When I heard this, cold sweat broke out on my face. I couldn't help remembering what he'd warned me about back then. For a while after that incident, I never heard that knocking sound again. Not until just now, right before I went to bed, that familiar knocking came back. Looks like tonight I'll have to sleep with earplugs again. This happened a long time ago when I was still a high school student. At the time I thought it was terrifying. But looking at how things turned out, it was actually kind of lucky. That day, like usual, I overslept, so I did a karate minus chop sprint to the station and squeezed onto the train heading to school. Once I got on the train, I thought made it. That's when I felt my stomach churning. A violent urge to shit attacked me from deep in my intestines. The pain made my scalp tingle. I felt like if my arse relaxed even slightly, my life would be over. I had no choice but to clench with everything I had, desperately holding it in until I could get off. The whole way, I was breaking out in cold sweat, but I kept holding on. Finally, I safely reached the station near school and got off. I rushed in another karate minus chop sprint into the south side of the station. It was such an emergency that I didn't think twice. I saw an empty bathroom stall and charged straight in. Immediately pulled down my pants and sat down. Only after sitting did I realize I hadn't even closed the door. I quickly shut it. The moment I closed the door, I saw a black suit jacket hanging on the hook on the inside of the door. The situation startled me. I let out a mental scream. I thought, no way. Is someone using this stall? Or did some homeless person leave their clothes here? It felt weird and disgusting. But at this point there was no way I could go to another stall. So I didn't care anymore and just kept going in that bathroom. After finally taking care of part of it, the pain in my stomach eased and I calmed down. I started looking more carefully at that suit jacket. It was a cheap minus looking, shabby suit jacket. I thought maybe there's a wallet in the pocket. Following that thought, I reached my hand into the jacket pocket. There really was something that felt like a folded wallet. I thought to myself as I pulled it out to look. When I took it out, it was real. I wondered how much money was inside. But when I opened it, I discovered it wasn't a wallet at all. It was a small photo album for holding pictures. Inside were all photos of women. If they'd been ordinary photos, that would have been one thing. I could have enjoyed looking at some pretty girls. But they weren't ordinary photos at all. They were photos of women whose faces looked like they'd been slashed to pieces with something like a razor blade. The instant I saw those photos, I froze. Cold sweat ran down from the top of my head because those photos were just too disgusting. I was genuinely shocked at my age. It was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that. Suddenly, I noticed a black shadow appear beside my hand. The shadow slowly grew larger, then blocked out the light above my head. Reflexively, I looked up and nearly jumped out of my skin. A man was peering down at me from above the stall partition, half his face visible. We locked eyes for about a second. He didn't say a word. Before I could even react, he roughly grabbed the suit jacket from above and bolted out of the neighboring stall. While I sat there, stunned by how fast he'd moved, a 10,000 yen bill came fluttering down from above, landing near me. I don't know if that 10,000 yen was hush money or what. Either way, I picked it up afterward and spent it with my friends on food entertainment. You might not think this was a particularly terrifying experience, but for me at the time, it was genuinely frightening. And to this day, I still can't understand what kind of person takes a razor blade and slashes people's faces in photographs. Was it some kind of curse? Or just pure hatred being vented? This happened during my college years, probably during summer break. I'd gone back to my hometown and was hanging out with two friends from elementary school. We'd gotten into this Gundam card game, so we go to one of my friends' houses to drink and play cards together. Let's call those two friends Tokinaka and Oda. That day, like usual, we were heading to Tokinaka's place. Oda and his house first, then rode our bikes toward Tokinaka's. The road to Tokinaka's house ran alongside the railway tracks. The only place with street altered where you could actually see anything was at the railroad crossing. The two of us pedaled along that narrow road in pitch darkness, our bike lights barely illuminating what lay ahead. We'd been riding for a while when the crossing came into view about 50 meters ahead. That's when Oda spoke up. "What is that thing?" I looked toward the crossing, but my eyesight's terrible and I don't usually wear glasses, so I could only vaguely make out something moving there. I couldn't tell what it actually was. Oda told me he thought whatever it was seemed off, so he suggested we take a detour to avoid it. I joked back at him, "What? You think it's a ghost?" But Oda, who usually loved joking around, had a completely serious expression on his face, so I dropped the playful attitude and agreed to take the detour. Before reaching the crossing, there was a side road we could turn onto. We decided to take that roundabout route to bypass the crossing and continue on. After we turned onto the detour, I asked again, "So what was that thing?" Oda answered, "It was pretty far away, so I couldn't see clearly, but I think it was an elementary school kid, and the kid seemed to be dancing." I thought to myself, it's past midnight, and there's an elementary school kid dancing on a country road like this. That definitely felt strange, unsettling, so we bypassed the crossing and got back onto the road that ran along the railway tracks. That's when Oda said, "Still pedaling? That kid's still there, still dancing. That's really weird." Part of me thought it wasn't a big deal, but if it really was a child, I was actually kind of worried. so I suggested we call the police. Right then, a voice called out to us from the direction of the crossing. Oda and I both turned to look back at the same time. When we did, we saw the elementary school kid who'd been dancing now waving at us. Under normal circumstances, you wouldn't think much of it, but for some reason, I got goose and stall on my body. Oda seemed to feel the same way. "Let's just get out of here," he said. We started pedaling hard. I kept glancing at Oda as we rode. He looked back over his shoulder and suddenly, as if he'd seen something, his face went tight with fear. He stood up on his pedals and pumped furiously, racing away. I thought he must have seen the kid chasing us. I was too scared to look back and confirm. I just pedaled as hard as I could to keep up with Oda's pace. The farther we rode, the fainter the child's voice became. Only then did Oda and I feel safe enough to slow down a bit. I asked Oda if that thing was still there. He glanced back and told me he couldn't see it anymore. I felt a little more at ease. Then I asked him if that thing really looked dangerous. He said he wasn't quite sure, but he thought it probably wasn't anything supernatural, because the thing's appearance had been very clear. Hearing him say that, I breathed a sigh of relief. Just as we were relaxing, the sound of a train came from the distance. It was a freight train heading our way. The cargo train passed by on the tracks beside us. For about a minute, Oda and I stopped talking and just listened to the sound of the train moving. As the sound grew fainter, I noticed there seemed to be another sound mixed in with it, something that didn't quite fit. As the train noise got quieter and quieter, I could hear the sound mixed within it growing louder and louder. And that sound, it was one I'd heard before. It was the shouting voice of that elementary school kid calling out to us. Oda unlocked eyes. His expression looked like he was about to cry. Clearly he'd heard it too. I turned around to look back toward the railroad crossing. The crossing was already far behind us, but because there were no street halted, I couldn't confirm whether the school kid was there or not, since we both felt this was really bad. We sped up and pedaled our bikes as fast as we could to get away, but even though we picked up speed, that voice didn't get any more distant. Instead, it kept getting closer and louder. Right then, in the beam of my bicycle light, I saw a child wearing short sleeves and shorts suddenly appear far ahead of me. He was shouting greetings at us while running toward us at full speed. Oda and I both saw it at the same time. Oda screamed in terror, threw down his bike, and ran. I fell into a panic too. Just like him, I jumped off my bike, turned around, and we ran together. We ran back about 200 meters before we stopped. After a while, we both calmed down. The child's voice had disappeared. After that, Oda and I used our phone lights to illuminate the road as we walked back, then quickly got on our bikes and headed toward Tokinaka's place. The whole way there, we were both so tense we didn't say a single word. Not until we arrived at Tokinaka's house and saw him open the front door did I finally relax. We told Tokinaka what we'd just experienced. After hearing us out, he just thought we'd probably made a mistake. He didn't believe our story at all. Later, we drank and played Gundam card games and forgot about the terrifying incident. But around 3 o'clock, Tokinaka's older brother came into the room carrying a bag of alcohol. He said that on his way back from the convenience store just now, he'd seen a police car stopped right in the middle of a certain side road. Hearing this, Oda said,